I just got my certificate for passing JLPT N1, which is the top level of the Japanese language proficiency test. It's been a long journey because I've taken N3, N2 and N1, so I'm going to share a bit about my experiences and what I think of the test, and at the end of the video we'll open this together. If you're learning Japanese, you will definitely have heard of the JLPT, but in case you need a refresher, it's a test that has 5 levels from N5 at the bottom to N1 at the top. The test tests your knowledge of kanji, vocabulary and grammar, as well as your reading and listening ability. It's all multiple choice, and there's no composition part where you have to speak or write anything, which does make it a questionable test of Japanese proficiency, but I'll get onto that later. I took N3 before I came to Japan after about 1.5 years of studying. I took N2 a year later, the week I arrived in Japan when I was still jet lagged, and then I put off taking N1 for a few years until a few months ago, after about 6 years since I started learning Japanese. To prepare for N3 and N2, I mostly did the typical kind of textbook study. For N3, I used the Tobira Intermediate textbook, and for N2, I used the Try N2 book. Tobira is a fantastic textbook. It really helped me improve not just for the test, but also my Japanese ability overall. The Try book, not a single word of vocabulary, grammar point, or anything from that book actually showed up on the N2 test. The only reason I breezed through N2 was because in addition to the textbook study, I was doing other real-world engagement with Japanese. I was watching TV shows, I was going to language exchange events, that kind of thing. And this made me realise a big myth about the JLPT. If you search online for any kind of JLPT related material, you'll be quickly greeted by lists of kanji, vocabulary and grammar organised by JLPT level. The implication is that if you memorise anything on one of those lists, you will be equipped and ready to sit the JLPT exam at that level. This is a lie. There used to be official lists of kanji, vocabulary and grammar by JLPT level up until the test was updated in 2009. So any list that you see online are either based on the pre-2009 test or they're complete guesswork. It's still good knowledge, it's stuff worth knowing and will help you in your Japanese studies, but they don't actually mean anything in the context of the real test. By the way, in case you're wondering what the N stands for in all the N levels, it stands for Nihongo and New, because it's the new test as opposed to the pre-2009 test, which didn't have N's. So if you can't use a list, how do you prepare for the test? Well, in order to prepare for the Japanese language proficiency test, you need to get proficient at Japanese. For the early levels, that does mean hitting the books, because you need to memorize that fundamental vocabulary and grammar that will get you understanding Japanese. But for the later levels, N2 and especially N1, you're far more tested on your ability to understand complex discussions and topics. There aren't really any textbooks to train you for that, although some do try. Far better training is exposure to real-world Japanese, watching TV shows and anime, listening to music and podcasts in Japanese, talking to people and reading books and essays. Treat everything you find as study material. Find things you don't know, write them down and memorize them later. Maybe instead of proficiency test, comprehension ability test would be a more appropriate name, but you still need to be able to think in and comprehend the language. You can't just pull information from a list. So, why would you want to take the JLPT? And is it worth it? Well, if you want to live and work in Japan, it can be very helpful or even necessary when you're applying for jobs or trying to get into university. The higher levels also score you points on the application for highly skilled professional and permanent residency visas, which you'll need if you want to stay in Japan for the really long term. For many employers, admissions officers and immigration officers, a JLPT certification is the easiest proof that you as an applicant have the required Japanese ability for whatever it is that you're applying for. However, in my experience, it's not entirely essential. As I said, I passed N2 the week I arrived in Japan, and N2 is typically the minimum business level Japanese that you need to survive in a Japanese workplace. But in all the job hunting I've done since, I have never once been asked what my JLPT level is. I always put it on my CV, of course, but then when we get to the interview, they always ask, like, what is this Nihongo Noryoku Shiken? What is the JLPT? And I explain that it's the standard exam for foreign learners of Japanese to assess their ability, and they're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then we move on to the next thing because we've already been chatting in Japanese for 20 minutes or so they don't really need that extra proof of my ability. If you're applying for jobs at places that actively hire foreign talent, you are more likely to be asked about your JLPT level. I think the reason I had this experience is because I was applying to jobs in the creative industry that don't typically hire from overseas. The conventional wisdom is that N2 is the only level that employers care about, because that's the level where you can start to communicate with your co-workers in Japanese. But my impression is that competition may have gone up because I feel like I've seen more N1 requirements around nowadays. The question is why you would take the exam at any level below that. N3 can be useful if you're applying for the JET program or another Teach English in Japan program, because it shows clear proof that you have at least tried to learn the language and you can speak a little bit, and when you arrive in Japan you'll be able to learn much more. And that's why I took the N3, because I was applying for the JET program. I didn't get in. I can talk about that some other time. N4 and N5, they can also give you points on your JET program application, and there are some edge cases where they might be useful. Like one time I spoke to someone whose university wouldn't let them open a Japanese club until they had N5. But outside of those kinds of situations, I really wouldn't bother. And I wouldn't bother because the test is not cheap to take. I think it's $100 in the US. And it's a whole palaver getting to the test center, and it's a long 2 to 3 hour exam depending on the level, plus an hour break in between, which means it's going to take up your whole day, and that's a lot of hassle to go through for, in the case of N4 and N5, a qualification that doesn't really mean anything to anyone. If you are at that elementary level, or even N3, and you just want to assess yourself, just download a practice paper from the JLPT website, set test conditions for yourself, set a timer, and just do the exam there for free. You can save a lot of money that way. So, N1. Honestly, I didn't think it was that hard. I mean, I didn't properly study for it. All I did was live in Japan for 3 years. But I found the hardest part of any JLPT test is the constantly changing format between questions, especially the listening section. Because in the listening section, sometimes the answers are written on the paper, sometimes they're not, they're only read out, sometimes the questions are on the paper, sometimes they're not, they're only read out, and everything only gets read out once, so you really have to be paying close attention. That's why it's a good idea to do practice tests beforehand, and make sure you eat well before going to the exam, because your energy and concentration ability will be tested. I took maybe a bit of a risk, just assuming that 3 years of daily exposure to Japanese would be enough to get me to pass the test, and thankfully it was. So let's have a look inside. Oh, would you look at that? There we go. Japanese language proficiency test, certificate of results and scores. It's got my name, and it's got my picture, and it's got my score, and it's got the word passed. And this too will be yours one day if you don't give up. So keep studying. It'll be worth it. I've been job hunting again lately, and being able to show that I have N1 has actually been a little bit helpful. So follow your dreams, believe in yourself, and yeah, you can do it. Oh my god, what's this? It's another smaller certificate, a little shiny one. I don't really know what that's for, but I'll treasure this as well. Thanks for watching. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more videos about life in Japan and learning Japanese and anything else I want to talk about. Bye!